I think it's about time I made a rogue build for mid-game to lower level players. Roll it. Welcome back. And yes, that time has come where I release a few build videos. Yeah, I know. Everybody and their mother makes build videos, but nobody really makes them for mid-game or lower level players. You know, from around 50k to 70k item level, which I consider to be mid-game. And I get it. I get why most people don't make those guides, and it's because those builds are temporary since your goal is to get stronger. Or are they temporary? Most players just want the best possible builds available to work towards, and there is nothing wrong with that. But did you know that the build you will see now that's at 50k plus item level has very little difference to an endgame build of 80 to 85k? Did you also know that the only real differences are not the actual gear, but your level of enchantments, collars, insignias, mounts, and companions? Which means even at 50k item level, you can have almost identical gear as an endgamer. Keyword is almost, because some gear differences exist, but we will get to those further along in the video. My goal is to prove that even at 50k item level, that you can cap your stats, you can be competitive, and you can have most of the shinies that endgamers use, and then slowly upgrade enchantments, insignias, collars, and whatever else to be a so-called endgamer. You don't really need every new best in slot item that comes along, because some of them you won't even be able to access anyways due to item level restrictions or maybe even time limitations due to life. The build I will be providing you now, although not anything game-breaking and new as far as a concept, is a build that is extremely viable and will continue to be viable even after new modules with better gear are released. And by viable, I mean competitive in almost all content, and with a few tweaks can be competitive in endgame content as well. This build will help you familiarize yourself with how builds work so you can in the future create your own. This build will help you understand what is important and how you prioritize your choices for your build. Builds are always a moving target. They evolve and change all the time. So I'm hoping by creating a build for newer to mid-game players that it can teach you the method of build creation and at the same time give you a build that has a foundation that can last long into the future. Also, something I think you need to know is that no good build is super cheap. There's always a certain amount of time and Astro Diamonds you have to invest to get what you need.
This is the way. This is the way. This is the way.
Anyways, enough of my word diarrhea. Quick shout out to all my channel members who support me. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell to get notified for every new video I drop. Let's begin with race. Race isn't extremely important, but some choices can help you more than others, since some races offer stats you might want more, which will help you reach your goal to cap your rating percentages a bit easier. Excluding any race that I feel doesn't offer the bonuses I'm looking for, I have reached my final 3 choices that suit our needs as rogues. Those choices are the Wood Elf, the Gith, and the Dragonborn. As you see on your screen now, each race offers something different. What you need to take into consideration before deciding which one of these 3 remaining races you should invest in is what bonuses are more important and which ones are easier to cap, plus the initial ability scores each race provides. The most useful ratings for any damage dealing class are in this order: Power, Combat Advantage, Crit Strike and Crit Severity, and then Accuracy. Normally you would go for the Dragonborn because it has power and critical strike bonuses, which is super useful. But that being said, power is easier to cap than combat advantage and critical strike, so we must take that into consideration before making our choice. Personally, I would go for the Gith race due to the combat advantage bonus, or the Wood Elf because of the 5% critical strike bonus. Critical strike, in my opinion, is more difficult to cap than combat advantages, so the obvious choice would be the Wood Elf. But this is where the ability rolls come into play. The problem with the Wood Elf race, in my opinion, though not a huge one, is that it doesn't let you roll strength in your initial rolls. It doesn't even allow charisma, which is one of my main choices for an ability score. Also, with the new addition of the new lightning class combat enchantment that gives you critical strike and accuracy when attacking, then the need for the Wood Elf's critical strike bonus becomes even less relevant. Granted, the gains or losses are not game breaking regardless of what race you choose, but I'm a min-maxer, and as such I try and squeeze every ounce of damage I possibly can out of every choice I make. So with the Dragonborn and the Wood Elf ruled out, the Gith race becomes the only available option that suits my needs. It allows me to get an extra 5% combat advantage off the jump, and I can choose +2 to strength in my initial ability score roll as well. I can also add +2 dexterity, which is also good for rogues for the critical severity. I would have preferred charisma, but for a new to mid-game player, dexterity would probably be the better choice. Also, just in case case you were wondering, I left out the metallic Dragonborn on purpose due to how difficult it is to obtain and with a very high cost if you do. For Githyn Dragonborn, you can buy the race unlock on its own for 500 Zen. You can also get the race packs, which come with other stuff too, for 5,000 Zen, but I personally would avoid spending $50 just for a pack that has a race in it. That's absolutely crazy talk.
What are you trying to get crazy with, Essay?
Metallic Dragonborn is a rare drop from the old Dragon Forge lockbox, so completely at the whim of the RNG fairy. You either have to buy the boxes and keys or buy/trade with another player who has one. The only completely free race of the ones that I mentioned as my main choices is the Wood Elf, so you can use this instead of the Gith, which is my primary choice if you don't want to spend any money at all. But like I said, the choice is yours. In the game, once you open your character sheet, you will notice 6 ability scores on the top right. From here, you can add up to 24 points in total. The 3 main choices for a rogue are strength, dexterity, and charisma. But make sure to max out every point into STR. STR is picked for the physical damage boost it provides and stamina regeneration. Then, you can pick either dexterity or charisma, or even mix and match and add a few points to both. Dexterity gives you crit severity and movement speed, and charisma gives you forte and recharge speed. You can view what each ability score gives you just by hovering over it. Now let's get into the gear choices. But before we do, I think you should know that the main focus when creating a build is knowing what is needed most. Your number one priority as a rogue is to deal damage. That is your role. What helps you deal damage is obviously items that help you deal that damage. But just slapping on gear that gives you damage boosts isn't enough and not the correct way of building your rogue. The main focus first and foremost is getting your ratings balanced, which means getting as close as possible to 90% on your 5 main ratings, which are in this order: power, combat advantage, crit severity, critical strike, and accuracy. You don't have to be at 90% ratings to deal good damage, but the goal should always be to get to 90% for maximum benefit. That being said, the gear or items you should focus on should have percentages of a specific rating you need, or straight up rating points to the rating you want. Damage bonuses from gear are secondary. For example, if you're at 80% critical strike, I wouldn't use the Queen's Golden Opal Ring that gives you 3% damage from your at-wills. I'd use the Soothsayer's Ring of Absolution that gives me 7% crit strike rating instead. Even though the 3% damage looks attractive, you'd benefit more from getting 80% crit strike to 87 than 3% damage from your at-wills. That's how you need to look at every choice you make. Once your ratings are at acceptable levels, then you can try and squeeze in damage boosting gear. But even at endgame, most players don't have many damage boosting gear pieces. Most, if not all, endgamers have gear that adds percentages to their ratings and only situationally use gear that adds a specific damage boost. Now that we got that covered so you know how to prioritize your choices, we can get into the build at hand. So as you see on your screen right now, I lowered my item level to just over 50k item level from 85k. So I can show you that even at this item level, you can put together a very competitive build. The item level would have actually been much lower if I didn't have max bolster on my mounts and companions, but there's no way to remove bolster once you have it, so I had to keep it as it is. And I didn't have time to farm new gear and create new characters just to have lower bolster. So this build is with 100% bolster on both companions and mounts, which means you need 10 mythic mounts and 10 mythic companions to achieve 100% bolster. This build definitely still works without max bolster, so don't even worry about that. I just felt that you should know before I actually continue. And at first glance, some new players might find some of this gear intimidating, but I promise you it's not as difficult as it might seem. Some of this gear does take longer than others to obtain due to RNG, but you don't need to have extremely high item levels to participate to get any of these items. The gear you see on your screen comes from 5 places. Dragon Hunts, which has a very low item level requirement to join, 22k to queue for ancient dragons that with modifiers give the parts you need to trade for the gear. The campaign itself only has an 18k item level requirement just to start. The Vault of Stars dungeon has a 40k item level to join if private, and 45k if public, but it does need to be unlocked by progressing the Sharandar campaign to the end of episode 1. The Dragonbone Vale campaign has a 45k item level requirement, the North Dark Reaches campaign has a 50k item level requirement, and then there's the Auction House, which is absolutely free for everyone to use. So let's begin with the gear you can obtain from Dragon Hunts via the Dragon Hunt store from the Dragon Slayer campaign, which you can join even if you're 22k item level, as you will be scaled up to be able to contribute anyways, so don't worry so much about that. The Serene Hood is one of, if not the best headpiece in the game currently, and most endgamers will use it more often than not. It has 1850 item level, which is one of the highest in the game. It grants you critical strike, deflect severity, and combined rating, but what makes this headpiece so good is the equip bonus Butcher's Focus, which can grant you up to 10% critical strike if you have max stacks. 10% if you can maintain it is huge, but on average you will still be able to at least maintain 5, 6 to 7% critical strike even as a new to mid-game player. The Serene Hood of the Dragon Hunter costs in Astral Diamonds 250,000. That's 2.5 days of random Qs, plus 1,250 crackling strands and 60 dragon ridges. Before I continue, here's a quick explanation of how to obtain some of the required reagents to obtain your gear. Dragon scales can drop from any dragon, though the older the dragon is, the more you will get. Dragon claws and dragon horns can drop from completing a dragon hunt with an easy or medium modifier. Death's Door gives the best chance and is the least bothersome. Elemental strands also come in small quantities from dragon hunts, but are best farmed out in the world as you can visit specific maps to get the type you need. The 5 types are Decayed, found in swampy and decaying regions, Crackling, found in sandy and stormy regions, Verdant, found in lush and forest regions, Charred, found in volcanic regions, and Frozen, found in snowy regions. They drop while killing mobs about every 30 seconds since they have internal cooldowns, and about 40 to 50 strands per drop that get shared among the party. So if you are farming them solo, which is what I recommend, you'll get 40 to 50. But in a full party, you would get around 8 to 10 each. As an extra, you will also get chromatic strands, which you can donate to your guild coffers under Treasures of Tyranny. Here are all the locations for elemental strands in a chart created by my friend and Discord manager, Etikette, as well as a chart for dragon parts that she created. Her blog is in the description as well, so please drop her a follow. She has tons of great information and works hard at providing it for everyone who needs it. Feel free to pause the screen to see those locations or screenshot it or what have you. Now back to gear selections. The Sharp Jacket of the Dragon Hunter has an item level of 1,850 and gives you combat advantage, critical severity, and combined rating. But the equip bonus is where the magic happens. And in my opinion, one of the best and easier to activate equip bonuses in the entire game is called Reckless Rage. Whenever you deal damage, you gain 3% crit severity, and it stacks 5 times, which means you can have an endless supply of 50% crit severity all the time, with no extra requirements other than dealing damage. 15% critical severity is a huge number, which allows you to free up other resources and allocate them to ratings you need more. With this chest piece, which is the best in the game currently, you should be capping your crit severity with ease, and maybe need a few minor adjustments in a worst case scenario, but it's definitely a must-have. The Sharp Jacket of the Dragon Hunter costs 300,000 Astral Diamonds, which is 3 days of random Qs, 1,250 Decayed Strands, 65 Dragon Ridges, 200 Hardened Plates, and 100 Dragon Kills to unlock. The Soothsayer's Ring of Absolution has 1,650 item level and grants you 4,950 Forte, 1.5% action point gain, and combined rating. But the equip bonus is where this ring shines. Enduring Critical increases your critical strike up to 7%, which is in my book one of the best ring bonuses in the game and definitely extremely helpful in keeping those ratings as close to 90% cap as possible. The Soothsayer's Ring of Absolution costs you 150,000 Astral Diamonds, which is 1.5 days of random Qs. It'll also cost you 1,250 Frozen Strands, 65 Dragon Ridges, 190 Finger Bones, and requires 50 Dragon Kills to unlock. Then we have the last piece from the Dragon Hunts called the Defiant Dwarven Limb Pattern. It grants you 1,600 item level, 2,400 critical strike, 1.5% action point gain, and a decent combined rating. For me, the equip bonuses on most shirts or pants are mediocre to bad at best. Most players stick to the critical charge equip bonus for the extra action points and just choose the one that has the most useful ratings that they need. In this case, I picked one with critical strike. Granted, these pants are actually better when there's a full set applied to it, granting an extra 1,500 power, crit severity, and awareness as a set bonus, but we won't need that set bonus since the shirt that we have chosen for this build is much more useful than the bonus from the Defiant set, but we'll get to that. The Defiant Dwarven Limb Pattern is 150,000 Astral Diamonds, which is 1.5 days worth of random Qs, 1,250 Decayed Strands, 60 Dragon Ridges, 175 Hardened Plates, and requires 75 Dragon Kills to unlock. And just a quick clarification, when I say 75 Dragon Kills to unlock, it doesn't mean every time you need a new piece that you have to kill another 75 dragons. dragons. All you have to do is get to 100 dragon kills, and you've already accomplished all these requirements for every single piece you want. From then forwards, you just have to gather the other reagents like the hardened plates, the decayed strands, the dragon rages, and so on and so forth. Okay? So you don't have to do like 100 kills and then another 75 kills. That's madness. That's absolutely insane.
Oh, you crazy.
Now that you got that, let's keep going. For the hardened plate, use the easily irritated modifier. And for the finger bones, use the resilience modifier. Have these at tier 3 for guaranteed 12 of each part, as well as 7 dragon rages per ancient dragon slain. 250 rages equals 36 ancient dragons. 375 hardened plates equals 31 ancient dragons. And 190 finger bones equals 16 ancient dragons. So in addition to the time spent farming the strands and ancient dragons for kill count and parts, for all these items it will cost around 8.5 days worth of rough astral diamond earnings. Now let's get back to the items from the Vault of Stars dungeon, which you can join at 40k item level in a private queue and 45k item level in a public queue. The items we are after are the Wrist Guards of Precipitation from the Hardcore Vault of Stars mini-boss, the Wasteland Wanderers also from the Hardcore Vault of Stars mini-boss, and the Red Eyes Glare Ring from the normal Vault of Stars loot chest once completed. Just to clarify once again for those that don't know, only Hardcore Vault of Stars can spawn mini-bosses which drop some of this gear. That's why I specify Hardcore Vault of Stars mini-bosses to avoid misunderstandings. Also, these items are unfortunately RNG related, so it can take a minute to get them to drop for you from the mini-boss, and in some extreme cases longer than you would like, but most of the time they shouldn't take too long to drop for you, especially if you get into a first mini-boss farming group. So like I said, the Wrist Guards of Precipitation come from the mini-boss in Hardcore Vault of Stars. They have a lower item level of 1525 and grant you critical severity, defense, incoming healing, and combined rating. But just like every other piece of gear, we focus on the equip bonus, which is the bread and butter of most of the best items in the game. The Escalating Torrent equip bonus grants you up to 7,500 power at max stacks, and for me at this item level, it was way more useful than other choices due to the fact that at lower item levels, capping power is more of a challenge than in higher ones. I mean, this isn't the best arm piece in the game and will eventually get switched out, but if you suffer from low power and have trouble capping, this is a great choice. Wasteland Wanderers also come from the mini-boss in Hardcore Vault of Stars. They have 1,525 item level, they grant you defense, deflection, and combined rating, and the equip bonus is Brute's Advantage, which grants you 5% combat advantage when you are close to your target. Combat Advantage is the second most useful rating in the game currently for a DPS, so this is a great choice as your primary boots, and many endgamers still use this from time to time in endgame content. The Red Eyes Glare Ring comes from the normal version of the Vault of Stars and only drops from the loot chest once you complete the final boss fight. It grants you 4,500 critical severity, 1,200 combined rating, and has the equip bonus called Unseelie Sight that gives you 5% power and 2.5% accuracy, which is a total of 7.5% just from percentages alone. One of the best rings in the game without a doubt due to the high amount of stat points and the power which helps you cap at lower levels. Now that we got the Vault of Stars out of the way, let's move on to the Dragonbone Veil campaign for your artifact set. You can start the Dragonbone Veil campaign as long as you're at 45k item level and above. The only requirement to get the free artifact set is reaching 1000 points to complete the campaign, which will take you roughly 4 weeks in total due to time gates. As a reward for reaching the last milestone, you will receive the Shattered Mythallar pack that will contain the Mythallar Fragment artifact at uncommon quality, the Mythallar Shard necklace at legendary quality, and the Mythallar Peace belt also at legendary quality. Once upgraded to mythic quality, the Mythallar Fragment artifact grants you 1,200 item level, 900 accuracy, 1,800 combat advantage, 12% stamina regeneration, and 960 combined rating. The Mythallar Shard necklace grants you 1,500 item level, plus 6 to intelligence, 1,125 crit severity and incoming healing, and 1,350 combined rating. And the Mythallar Piece grants you 1,500 item level, plus 3 to strength and charisma, 1,100 critical strike, 1,125 defense, and 1,350 combined rating. All the ratings and the extra ability points are great to have, but the main thing that bumps this artifact to the top of my list is the actual set bonus. The set bonus is called Raw Pressure, which does an additional 100 magnitude damage hit whenever you deal combat advantage damage, which is a very good bonus to have as a damage dealer and can only work as long as you have the full 3-piece set. As an additional bonus, the artifact itself is one of the best in the game when activated, since it applies a 15% debuff to your target's resistance. The debuff doesn't stack with other Mythallar artifacts, so be aware of that. Now let's move on to the items from the North Dark Reaches campaign, which is only going to be a weapon set. The Stormforged weapon set to be exact. This weapon set is obtained by completing specific tasks in the campaign window. You can begin the task from below in the campaign window by clicking on some assembly required, which will inform you that you need to complete the 5th milestone of the campaign that would take you 5 weeks to reach because you can only accumulate 100 progress per week. And then once reached, the Plight of the Blaspheme quest unlocks from an NPC in the North Dark Reaches, and from there just follow instructions until you get the final quest called Tempered in Shadows. And once completed, you will receive the Stormforged weapon set. Each weapon is worth 2000 item level. The Stormforged Cleaver main hand also gives you plus 100 damage, plus 600 combat advantage, 1500 critical strike, 900 critical severity, and 1800 combined rating. The Stormforged Knife, which is the offhand, also gives you plus 100 damage, 1500 accuracy, 1500 deflection, and 1800 combined rating. The 2-piece set bonus grants you extra damage as a damage dealer. You gain 7.5% damage for 15 seconds when you dodge, and you have an extra 10% chance to gain another 5% damage when dealing combat advantage damage. Both of these bonuses can occur once every 30 seconds and they last for 15 seconds. And when in the Underdark zones, you gain an extra 2% damage. This is a very good and powerful weapon set, even though some underestimate it. Don't be fooled. This weapon set is a beast and will serve you well, especially at lower item levels. I haven't mentioned Masterwork weapon sets yet because at lower item levels, you will have a lot less need for it, but I will get to that later in the video. Then we have our final gear piece that will come from the auction house. You can get this to drop from mini bosses in Dragonbone Vale as well, but it's cheap enough that you don't need to even bother. Just buy it straight up from the auction house and get it done quickly. The shirt in question is the Corroded Shirt of the Dragon Cult. It has 1300 item level, 975 critical strike and accuracy, 1.5% recharge speed, and 1170 combined rating. And the best part is the equip bonus that gives you 5% combat advantage, and that is the main reason that we use this shirt. But there's a trade-off. You also lose 25% control resistance. However, most endgamers consider that a small price to pay and still use this until this day. It's that good. At the moment, there are 8 pieces of gear you can use armor reinforcements on. Your headpiece, your armor, gloves, boots, necklace, both rings, and your belt. The major +1 armor reinforcements will give you 880 points of a rating of your choosing, but only 44 item level to help close the gap between your ratings and your total item level. It is important to remember that these are single-use items. You can't take them off and reuse them whenever you change your gear. They can either be made in your workshop or bought from other players via the auction house. They are unlikely to be less than 32k each because there's an Astral Diamonds cost in making them. You can use whichever reinforcement you feel you need to supplement the ratings you might be missing. But for this build, I have chosen power reinforcements for the head, armor, gloves, and boots, and combat advantage for the neck, rings, and belt. In total, that's 6,400 ratings for all 8 reinforcements. That's it as far as the main choices for this 50k item level build goes, but here are some alternative gear pieces you should be aware of. Some of this gear is actually better for higher item levels as well. For the headpiece, there's the Enclave Scout Hat that you can get from the Seals vendor with Seals of the North earned from random skirmishes and random standard dungeons. It gives you 7.5% accuracy instead of critical strike. There are some alternative chest armors that we can use. I just feel that they're not as good as the one that we have in this build, but there's a few more that come from Dragon Hunts. There's the Mighty Cuirass of the Dragon Hunter, which gives you accuracy and combat advantage, and there's also the Tactful Leathers of the Dragon Hunter, which gives you critical strike and critical severity. But I do think the one we're using is much better than those and a lot easier to proc. For the gloves, we have an alternative in the Mighty Van Braces of the Dragon Hunter that also come from Dragon Hunts. The reason I didn't add this to the build is because we needed the power. But if you can balance your power, feel free to replace the Wrist Guards of Precipitation with these. They cost 275,000 Astral Diamonds, 1,250 Verdant Strands, 60 Dragon Ridges, and 190 Wing Webbings. Use the Limited Conditioning modifier at Tier 3 to get 12 of these from each Ancient Dragon killed. And I'm not going to be adding the Petrified Wristlets as an alternative because they cost over 6 million Astral Diamonds on PC currently. Eventually, if you can afford them, you can get them, but these are just way too expensive for this build. For boots, there are multiple decent alternatives that you can use instead of the Wasteland Wanderers, excluding damage-dealing boots, since we are focusing on capping ratings on this build. Dragonhide Pikes from the Seals vendor using Seals of the Dragon, earned from Ancient Dragons, random advanced dungeon queues, and random trial queues. They grant you 10,000 accuracy ratings when you're in a party. The Forest Guardian boots for the 7,500 combat advantage ratings from the Sharandar store after gathering reagents from the Vault of Stars. and the Serene Boots of the Dragon Hunter for the 7.5% ratings, also from the Dragon Hunt store. They cost 300,000 Astro Diamonds, 1,250 charged strands, 65 Dragon Ridges, and 180 Finger Bones, and you need 75 kills to unlock. Like I said, at this item level, I'm not focusing on damage boots, I'm just focusing on ones that actually give you percentages and ratings that you might need. For weapons, you can get the Mirage weapons from the Cloaked Ascendancy, which are very powerful in single target situations, even at its low item level. You can even use the Blaspheme weapons from the North Dark Reaches at epic level. They are free through the campaign. Or Masterwork weapons if you can afford them, which are a very good investment for the long term. Since in endgame content, there is no better weapon set that is better. They are not mandatory at much lower item levels, but there's no harm in getting it if you can, because you'll need it at endgame. And Stronghold weapons are also an option as well, as they have the same bonus as the Masterwork weapons. They are lower item level, but the bonus stacks with Masterwork weapons, and these are bought in the Stronghold with Dragon Fangs and earned by doing Dragon Flights. For an artifact set, the only alternative is the Demogorgon set, which you can get from running the Demogorgon trial or buy from the auction house itself. For rings, there are many different kinds you can consider, but the only one I'd like to mention is the Queen's Golden Opal for the percentage damage and the ratings it provides. It also comes from the Vault of Stars at the loot chest at the very end. For a shirt, if you don't want the corroded shirt, use one of the other Defiant Dwarven shirts from the Dragon Hunt store, which can give you the set bonus while using the pants of the same kind. For pants, just use any that has the ratings that you need on them, or any bonus that you see fit. And as far as the remaining artifacts you can use, the main focus should be debuff artifacts, which are extremely useful for killing bosses and contribute a lot in completion runs. You'll have one already with the Mythallar Fragment from the Mythallar artifact set, as I mentioned earlier, but you'll need a few more to switch out since they don't stack, and if someone else is already using it, you might need to switch to a different one. One of the easiest ones to get is the Lantern of Revelation, which you can get as a quest reward at level 21 from Protector's Enclave or from random loot in dungeons. Another easy one to get is Halaster's Blast Scepter. It's more difficult to get via loot from the Tower of the Mad Mage dungeon, but through the auction house it's usually around 150 to 200,000 Astro Diamonds. Demogorgon's Reach from the Master Trial of Demogorgon as a loot reward if you're lucky, or you can buy it if it's available in the auction house for around 700 to 800,000 Astro Diamonds, which is expensive and it's kind of decent, so that's your call. And you can also get Wyvern's Knives, which can be bought in the Undermountain campaign store in the campaign menu. In the auction house, you can get it from around 300k to 400k Astro Diamonds, or from the trade bar store for 1,000 trade bars. These are among the best debuff artifacts in the game, so any of these would be perfect for your build. And there's also these debuff artifacts, but get what you can afford. In the enchantment section, you get to add 4 offensive, 4 defensive, 1 utility, 1 bonus, and 1 combat enchantment, plus 2 overloads, which aren't permanent enchantments, but they are very useful to know about because of their benefits. The last 3 leveling adventures give you 4 free uncommon enchantments in the form of choice packs, 2 single stack givers, a companion enchantment, and a combat enchantment. Second combat choice pack comes as a reward in the Acquisitions Incorporated adventure. To acquire more, you can buy from other players via the auction house, which is currently the cheapest option, or buy from the vendors in the Sage's Shop or the Adventurers Guild, but they are more expensive. Recently, some dual stat and additional combat enchantments were added with Module 25, Mezobranzan, and these can be bought from the Mezobranzan campaign store or from the auction house. Uncommon enchantments are the lowest level of enchantment you can get, but even at this level, they will serve your purpose. Feel free to use higher item level enchantments if you have them, or even upgrade them on your own. Also check the auction house, because sometimes you can buy a better quality one cheaper than the cost of the upgrade materials, unless you have the patience to go for the free upgrade materials route. When upgrading, it's best to raise 1 enchant all the way to mythic, then see what you need, as the amount of stats delivered at that quality is 2,250 points plus 1,340 combined rating, which can change your total percentage values quite a bit, and you might decide to swap out one of your duplicates for something else if no longer needed. For offensive enchantments, I have chosen Uncommon Amethyst ×4 for the combat advantage, but you can also use Garnet for power or Jade for critical strike if you feel your build needs more of it, or you can even mix and match. And it can be very useful down the road to be able to switch enchantments around to balance changes that occur when you get new gear. For defensive enchantments, I have chosen Uncommon Garnet ×4 for defense, and for utility, I have chosen Uncommon Garnet for the Forte. For bonus enchantments, you should really have both, uncommon movement and uncommon recharge speed. Use the movement speed enchantment for AoE situations and the recharge one in single target situations. For the combat enchantment, I use the lightning fast enchantment because of the rating percentages it grants me, but at lower grade it's probably better to use a poison thorn for the extra damage, and then swap to lightning flash once you level it up and get more crit strike and accuracy from it. Crisp burn is also a good alternative, but not as good as lightning flash or poison thorn. But if you can't afford buying multiple combat enchantments, then just stick a lightning flash and level it up when you can. Combat and companion enchantments should be the very first enchantments you level up out of the bunch. For overloads, if you can afford to use them, use Devil's Precision for the 5% critical strike and the 5% accuracy, and then use Rage of Flames for the extra 5% damage. They last 10 hours of combat time until you need to replace them. You can get these overloads without spending Astro Diamonds from the appointment event vendor in Protector's Enclave with tokens of challenge earned during appointment events. And of course, you can always buy them in the auction house as well. For my companion enchantment, there's only one choice, so, you can't choose anything else. But feel free to upgrade it if you can for a bigger benefit. Now let's talk about companions. Companion choices can be complicated, expensive, and ever-changing due to needs. Eventually, you will want 10 at Mythic for 100% bolster, but you can work up to that slowly at your own pace since bolster isn't a game changer. And here are some cheaper summon companion options that are going to show up in your screen. The Honey Badger is the better of the three at this current point in time, but I personally have chosen the Green Scale Bowman for this build since it's slightly cheaper. There's many more you can choose from, and the differences between most of the cheaper companions are very small. And I won't tell you to invest in the best companions because they are expensive and what's best changes all the time, especially when they're being manipulated by other videos. And the goal here is to have a decent viable build that can be tweaked in time but still competitive right now, which will make earning the Astro Diamonds to get what you want for long-term use so much easier. And here are some mostly affordable companions to get for their player bonus powers to improve your ratings or deal more damage. Those were just some of the choices for a mid-game build that you can use, and the companions don't need to be uncommon or rare. They can be epic or legendary versions if you can afford to buy them or upgrade them. The reason I added uncommon and rare instead is because they are much cheaper. That doesn't mean you can't get them at a better quality. Also, a really good investment for the future is getting the Raptor. Even if it's slightly expensive, it will serve you well for a long time in the future as long as they don't change things. You can get an account-wide legendary Raptor without spending Astro Diamonds with tokens earned from the Daily Reapers challenge. You can also buy a single one at epic quality from the trade bar store for 800 trade bars. And you can see the ones I've chosen for this mid-game build on your screen right now. For the companion enhancement, I chose Precision for the 7.5% crit strike. But of course, feel free to use whatever suits you better since there's most likely a chance you will be missing some of what I've mentioned in this video. This power takes its strength from the quality of the companion you have summoned rather than the one that delivered it to your list. And here are some companions you can buy for cheap that have that enhancement. Don't let the name fool you. The ratings from companion gear feed into your ratings. They don't go to your companion. Every companion gear piece I use for this build comes from Sharandar. This gear can be obtained through Shattered Diamonds, which you get from daily bounties, heroics, minor heroics, the Vault of Stars. You can buy 20 using campaign currency as well, or buy them straight off the auction house at a very cheap price lately. Once you have 100, you just click on it in your inventory and a random piece appears. I use the Glistening Sword Knot ×1 for the accuracy and the Glistening Grimoire ×2 for the combat advantage. Like companions, you will need 10 at Mythic for 100 bolster, but you can start with 5 at Epic and work your way up from there. And you'll gain bolster later on as you upgrade, and use a mount that has Tunnel Vision for a cheaper mount combat power option that deals tons of damage, especially when maxed out. Here are some cheap mounts with Tunnel Vision. For your mount equip power, use any you have available, but focus on ratings you need more of. When you get one at Mythic with 100% bolster, it will give you 4,500 stats, 3,000 item level, and 2,700 combined rating. Here are some epic mounts you can buy and use at a relatively cheap price that also have Insignia bonus options that you will need for this build. There's more at various prices, some more expensive and maybe some cheaper, but these are the cheaper options I found for this build. As for collars, what you need to know is that at epic quality, they are super cheap for the amount of item level and bonuses they provide you. Currently anywhere between 15,000 and 30,000 Astro Diamonds on PC. Each epic collar has 600 item level, so by using 5, you're giving yourself a 3,000 item level bump in general. But to upgrade these collars can be super expensive for very little gain. Every level you achieve gives you another 200 item level and an additional 1% on most of the bonuses. And to level up just for an extra 1%, you spend a shit ton of resources, time, or astral diamonds, not to mention the dust that you need. And on top of that, most of them only have 50% of the item level as combined rating. Most gear has 80%. So the higher the quality, the more they add to the gap between your rating value and your total item level, reducing your total percentage values. So let's stick to the epic collars for now, which are very cheap in comparison to legendary or mythic collars. And I'm not saying you shouldn't upgrade your collars. Just know it takes time and you don't have to rush towards that goal. You'll do just fine with epic collars. Trust me. Also remember, the collars cannot be a higher quality than the mount you are trying to hang it on. So epic collars need at least epic mounts for them to work. And you cannot equip two of the same type. So if you have two sturdies, for example, they cancel each other out and you get no benefit from either of them. For epic collars, I've chosen the sturdy crescent for encounter powers dealing 3% more damage, the wayfaring barbed for the 3% crit severity, the supportive crescent for the 3% stamina gain, the unified crescent for the 3% movement speed, and the practical regal for the 6% rough astral diamond bonus. Collars are a great source of high item level items for a very low cost, so grab these 5 for an instant boost in item level and damage as quick as you can. The Insignia bonuses I preferred for this build are Gladiator's Guile for the extra movement speed or stamina regeneration. Insignias needed are Regal, Illuminated, and Enlightened, and I'm using the Apparatus of Gond to apply the Insignia bonuses on. Then we have Artificer's Persuasion for the reduction to cooldowns when you use your artifact. The insignias needed are Illuminated and Barbed ×2, and I'm using the Enchanted Corsair to apply the insignia bonuses. Then I'm using Assassin's Covenant for the extra offensive ratings that it gives you. The insignias needed is Regal and Enlightened ×2, and I'm using the White Owlbear mount to apply the insignia bonuses on. And lastly, I'm using Warlord's Inspirations ×2 for the summoned companion damage. There are diminishing returns on these, so if one of them is giving you 12% damage boost to your companion, the second one that you add will only give you half of that, which is 6%. So it's your choice, but I think it's worth it, and that extra damage boost is not bad. The insignias you will need is Regal ×2 and an Enlightened for each one. And the two mounts that I'm using is the Gorgon and the Giant Beetle. Every mount I have chosen for these insignia bonuses are pretty cheap. For the actual insignias themselves, I use mostly dominance at epic quality for the power and the forte, with some aggression for critical strike and combat advantage. What you will need is whichever gives the ratings you need more of that you are missing. Most insignias at Epic are around 50 to 80k Astral Diamonds on PC. Legendary insignias start from around 250,000 Astral Diamonds, but you can also get legendary insignia choice packs with tokens of challenge earned during appointment events. For guild boons, this is pretty simple, and hopefully your guilds have them. I use critical strike, defense, movement speed, mount speed, or revive sickness depending on the content I'm running. For campaign boons, I'm not going to go through them all one by one because it's just simply too many. I'll just show you on the screen the choices I made, and you can copy or just use whatever you think is best. For consumables, I mostly use Wildstorm Elixir. It gives you 2,000 points of critical strike and 5% critical severity, and it also persists through death. You can buy these from the Vault of Piety with Ardent coins you get from invoking, or you can get them from the auction house. I also use Flask of Potency 3+1 that gives you 500 crit strike accuracy and power and 5% critical severity. And you can also make these in the workshop with Alchemy Profession at level 18 if I remember correctly. Also, I use Watermelon Sorbet or Squash Soup depending on the situation. Watermelon Sorbet gives you 5% power and accuracy, and Squash Soup gives you 5% critical strike and critical severity. You can make these during the Summer Festival or buy them from the Summer Festival store, and they can also be bought from other players in the auction house as well. Now let's quickly get into powers. For AoE, you'll want Path of Blade, Smoke Bomb, and Blade Flurry for your encounters, Duelist Flurry and Gloaming Cup for your at-wills, Skillful Infiltrator and Oppressive Darkness for your class features, and Shocking Execution and Whirlwind of Blades for your dailies. For single target, you'll want Wicked Reminder, Passive Blades, or Lashing Blade, and Assassinate for your encounters, Duelist Flurry and Gloaming Cup for your at-wills, and class features I use Invisible Infiltrator and Oppressive Darkness with Shocking Execution as the main daily. Now for your feats for your assassin. For an AoE environment, I use Toxic Blades, Master of Shadows, Duelist Expertise, Back Alley Tactics, and either Shadow's Flurry or Execution for your last choice. And for single target, I use Toxic Blades, Master of Shadows, Skullcracker, Back Alley Tactics, and Shadow's Flurry. Now that all that is out of the way, let me show you how this build does when it comes to capping stat. comes pretty close to capping everything even at this item level. Just remember your item level is constantly moving up, so the build needs to be adjusted accordingly, and so will your ratings. And that's about it for this mid-game build. Of course, there are more options for everything I talked about, but if I covered everything, the video would be over 10 hours long, and I think that the video is long enough as it is. I really do hope that this build is really helpful to you and shines a light on what you should be doing and how to prioritize your gear and item choices. This build can last a long time, especially if you upgrade some of the items in the video, like enchantments, companions, or what have you. And with a few tweaks here and there with every new item that comes along, you will always be able to contribute and be competitive. Like, you really don't need all the best shit to be a good player. You really don't. And all those elitists that say you do, tell them Galactic says suck my... You know how it goes. Anyways, take care and let me know in the comments what you think. And remember, there are timestamps in the description if you want to navigate back to a certain topic in the future. And if I've made any mistakes in the video, which is possible because, long ass video, also let me know in the comments. Anyways, Galactic here. Peace out. Stay safe.